Thank you for joining us on the program tonight. Now, an African Union-backed ceasefire monitoring group has released a damning report which accuses South Sudan government troops of killing 50 people by stuffing them into a shipping container in baking heat. The incident allegedly took place in October in Unity State, according to the report, which was made public late on Sunday. Metal containers are often used as makeshift prison cells in South Sudan. The government has not commented on these damning allegations, but in the past has strongly denied carrying out atrocities in the conflict. Thousands of people have been killed and millions displaced since conflict broke out in December 2013. Reports from Uganda indicate that a former chief of military intelligence and once close ally of President Museveni was arrested over the weekend, less than 3 weeks before the general elections. The dissident General David Sejusa was last week quoted in local media describing the ruling NRM government as a quote-unquote dictatorial regime that must be dismantled. The army has not disclosed the charges Sejusa will be facing, but sources indicate that he will face a court-martial Tuesday. Sejusa went into exile 3 years ago after accusing Museveni of grooming his son to succeed him. As our reporter Solomon Serwanja tells us, this is not the first time he has been arrested since he returned to Uganda.
His is a profile of a well-decorated soldier, a four-star general, a former member of the High Command of the Ugandan Forces, and a former director of both the internal and external security organization. General David Sejusa broke ranks with the NRM regime in June 2013 when he leaked a dossier to the media about the execution of top government officials who were against the succession plan of Muhoozi Kainerugaba to replace his father, President Yoweri Museveni, for the country's top job. That fallout left him exiled in the UK for 2 years until he returned in December 2014. Since his return, he has constantly criticized President Museveni's regime as dictatorial and cannot be removed through the ballot.
Museveni can never do any reforms. That's a waste of time. Because dictatorships are never reformed. They are dismantled.
Sejusa recently teamed up with top opposition leader Dr. Kizza Besigye, who equally believes in civil disobedience.
What happened in Kenya cannot happen here. I can tell you this. Anybody who tries to do that will be smashed completely. Completely. He will not even remain with the trace.
He shall not allow that election. I had him threaten. No one will stop. No one will stop. Yes, people will stop. People have ever stopped, and he knows it. People stopped Obote. People stopped the 1985 election. They have forgotten. There was supposed to be an election of Dr. Obote in 1985. We stopped it. The people. We were in Ruwero, by the way. But the people, they stopped it. In many other areas, yes, people can stop this election because it's meaningless.
Since his speech at Dr. Besigye's nominations in November, General Sejusa remained quiet until Sunday when he was arrested from his home in Naguru, a Kampala suburb.
But here he was just picked, taken to Makindye, without reading him his constitutional rights and informing him the charges for which he's being arrested. So he's there, he doesn't know. He doesn't know when he's going to court because the Makindye barracks has not received a production warrant, take him to the General Court Martial.
As the army prepares to deliver the general to the court martial, political scientist and senior lecturer at the Uganda Management Institute, Dr. Gerard Karieja, opines that the army has nipped in the bud a possible attack on the NRM regime.
One, he's a mobilizer. You cannot undermine his ability to mobilize. Two, he has been in security services. You cannot undermine his capacity to trade secrets. Three, to penetrate security services. You cannot undermine his intelligence. You cannot undermine his ability to excite some sections of security to go into civil disobedience, to support civil disobedience.
Reading through the pages of Sejusa's military profile, Dr. Karieja says that his arrest is an open letter to the rest of the public who plan violence. Former head of political intelligence at State House Charles Romushana concurs.
Mr. Museveni is stronger when his resilience is in not taking action against those who dissent, through arrest, through extrajudicial executions, to mention about a few. His power, his capacity is in restraint. And he has restrained himself on Mr. Tinyefu's. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let him come back to the country. But when you see his restraint crash, then you know that the force against him is heavier.
While many may argue that the arrest of General Sejusa may spell doom for Museveni in the upcoming elections, those of the opposing view believe that it could actually earn him political capital.
Those who believe that the country should not go back to war, it is a gain for NRM. For those who believe the fear of potential violence, they will now say, they will follow what we call the bandwagon effect. Since the situation is like this, would rather have the NRM in power than. So actually there is a lot of political value from having Sejusa arrested.
Solomon Serwanja, KTN News, Kampala, Uganda.
All right, so I want us to shift our focus now to the just concluded AU summit in Addis. The crisis in Burundi, alongside that of South Sudan, was a major talking point for UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in his address to African leaders at the AU summit on Sunday. The UN chief spoke highly of the AU's efforts to protect human rights, and especially women's rights, while expressing concern about the issues in South Sudan and Burundi. Here is what he had to say.
I'm particularly concerned the leaders in South Sudan have again failed to meet the deadline to form a transitional government. Instead of enjoying the fruits of independence, their people have endured more than 2 years of unimaginable suffering. In Burundi, I welcome your proposal to deploy human rights observers and to establish a prevention and protection mission. This crisis requires the most serious and urgent commitment from all of us. I applaud you for taking collective responsibility and acting decisively. The United Nations stands ready to support your efforts.
All right, the African Union has abandoned its plan to send 5,000 peacekeepers to help restore stability to the troubled nation that is Burundi. Officials said they would instead encourage political dialogue between Burundi's opposing sides. Burundi's President Pierre Nkurunziza had fiercely opposed the AU plans to send peacekeepers. His decision last April to seek a third term in office has led to ongoing violence and fears that Burundi is sliding into ethnic conflict. The UN estimates that at least 439 people have died and 240,000 have fled abroad since last April. The AU could have deployed troops without Burundi's consent, a clause in its charter that allows it to intervene in a member state because of grave circumstances, which include war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. But it would have been the first time it had done so. Next is where? You me now. All right, that development coming out of the AU summit over the weekend sent disappointment in various parts of Burundi. We want to get some perspective now on how that news was received in Burundi, as well as an update on the ongoing crisis there. I want to introduce you to my guest who's joining us right here on KTN News. We are keeping his identity hidden because we want to protect the lives of his family who are back home. And we're joined by Mo, and that's what we'll call him at the moment. And he's joining us from our town and city center studios, as well as lawyer Harun Dubi. Mo, I'd like to start with you. How has this news been received in Burundi today?
Well, people in Burundi are kind of very surprised and they're devastated. We do not understand how, first of all, how can we put a country like Burundi, where the government is killing its own people, make this country member of the AU Security Council? Second, we need those troops to protect our civilians, and the way it was rejected by the AU is, we don't understand, and we're shocked.
All right, Mo, I'll come back to you in just a moment, but I just want to bring in Harun Dubi, who's a lawyer joining us here. He's a Kenyan human rights lawyer as well. Harun, your response or your comment to this, it looked like things were moving pretty fast, and then we got to the AU and nothing.
Well, excuse me, the African Union, I think, has completely failed the people of Burundi because there was a decision earlier by the African Union to deploy security or peacekeeping mission in Burundi, and in the summit that is just concluded, they decided to rescind that decision. Well knowing that the people of Burundi are suffering, we have been seeing tens of, if not hundreds and thousands of them, crossing the lake to Tanzania. And more especially because the Constitutive Act of the African Union provides for, against non-legal transfer of power or non-legal assumption of power. What Pierre Nkurunziza did was to assume power contrary to the constitution of Burundi, of the Republic of Burundi, contrary to the Arusha Agreement, and the African Union needed to have advised him not to seek a third term so that he can secure the peace and prosperity of the future of the people of Burundi.
Okay, so Harun, I understand what you're saying about the African Union having failed on several counts leading up to this decision. Mo, obviously you're talking about the residents and the citizens of Burundi being quite disappointed. I'd like to talk about the state in Burundi as we speak. Could you describe that for us? Last week we heard about foreign journalists who were detained briefly and then released. Could you paint the situation for us there now? Could you also speak to us about, freedom of the media? We understand journalists have been attacked or the subject of attacks quite recently.
To summarize, the situation in Burundi is dire. The situation in terms of human rights, in terms of security, in terms of safety of individuals is completely dire because we have been reading reports about militias or state state military brutalizing journalists, brutalizing people they consider to be in opposition, as if opposition were an illegality, yet opposition is recognized in Burundi under the Burundian law. And we have seen human rights activists and human rights defenders being targeted for either elimination or being silenced, and others are disappeared. So it is actually a situation which one must fear might be going towards where Burundi and Rwanda came from in terms of genocide. Okay. It is something that I would expect the African Union and the United Nations, indeed, to take very quick steps to ensure that the safety and rights of citizens in Burundi is protected.
Maintained. Okay, Harun, I'd just like you to hold your thoughts for just a moment. Let's speak to our journalist.